I was running late for work and got on the wrong train by mistake. I realized my error immediately, frustrated with myself, just one more thing going wrong in a life full of wrong turns. I sat down, resigned to waiting for the next station. The man next to me lowered his newspaper, looked directly at me, and said, "You're exactly on time." Before we dive in, have you ever had a moment where something that seemed like a mistake turned out to be exactly what you needed? Drop your answer in the comments below. And if you love stories about synchronicity, finding purpose, and trusting the universe's timing, please subscribe so you don't miss our next one. Now let me take you back to the morning everything changed. I worked as a sales specialist for a tech company, cold calling businesses, pitching software solutions, hitting quotas. The pay was decent. The work was soul-crushing. Every morning, I woke up with a sense of dread. Every evening, I came home exhausted from pretending to care about conversion rates and quarterly targets. Every weekend, I told myself I'd start looking for something else, something meaningful, but I never did. 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend Phoebe had ended our 2-year relationship. Not because of a fight or betrayal, but because, as she'd said with tears in her eyes, "You're not really here, Jared. You're going through the motions with me the same way you go through the motions with everything else. I love you, but I can't be with someone who's this disconnected from their own life and doesn't want to change." She was right. I knew she was right. But I didn't know how to fix it. On a Tuesday morning in November, I was running late. I had hit snooze 3 times, dragged myself through a shower, and rushed to the subway station with wet hair and a growing sense of resignation about the day ahead. I was supposed to take the eastbound Blue Line to get to my office downtown, but I was distracted, replaying the previous night's insomnia-fueled thoughts about how I'd ended up in a life I didn't recognize, and I got on the westbound train instead. I didn't realize my mistake until the train had been moving for 2 minutes, and I looked up at the station map. Wrong direction. Completely wrong. "Damn it," I muttered, slumping in my seat. Of course, just one more thing going wrong. One more example of how I couldn't even get the basic things right anymore. The train was relatively empty, just a few other commuters scattered throughout the car. I was sitting near the middle, next to an older man in his 60s. He was well-dressed in a way that suggested quiet success rather than showiness. Nice coat, clean but not flashy, reading a newspaper with reading glasses perched on his nose. I pulled out my phone to text my manager that I'd be late. Again. As I was typing, the man next to me lowered his newspaper and spoke. "You're exactly on time." I looked up, confused. "Excuse me?" He was looking directly at me, with an expression that was both kind and knowing. "You think you got on the wrong train, but you didn't." I blinked. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "No, but I know you." There was something about his tone, not threatening or crazy, but calm and certain, that made me pause instead of immediately dismissing him as a weird subway stranger. "I'm just going to the next station and switching trains. I'm late for work." "Work you hate?" he said. It wasn't a question. I stared at him. "How? You're a sales specialist. You're good at it, because you're good at reading people and telling them what they want to hear. But you hate it, because it feels empty, because you wanted to be a teacher, but your parents told you teaching didn't pay enough. And now you're miserable." My heart was pounding. I've never told anyone about wanting to be a teacher, not even Phoebe. It was a dream I'd buried at 18 when my father had sat me down and explained, with charts and salary comparisons, why education was a nice idea but not a viable career. "Who are you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who's been exactly where you are," he said. "You ended things with Phoebe 3 weeks ago. Not because you didn't love her, but because you knew you were living the wrong life, and she deserved better than half of you, half of someone who wasn't even sure who he was anymore." I felt like I'd been punched. That was exactly why I'd let Phoebe walk away. I'd told myself it was mutual, that we'd grown apart, but the truth was darker and more painful. I couldn't give her a real relationship because I wasn't a real person anymore. I was just someone going through motions, hitting marks, surviving rather than living. "How do you know these things?" I demanded. He smiled gently. 30 years ago, I was sitting exactly where you're sitting, lost, on the wrong train, and someone helped me find my way back. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "There's an address here. When we get to the next station, you're going to get off this train and go there. It's going to seem random, you're going to have doubts, but trust me, it's exactly where you need to be." "This is insane. I don't even know you. I'm not going to some random address." "You can go to work," he interrupted calmly, "back to the job you hate, the life you're sleepwalking through, the slow death of becoming someone you don't recognize. Or you can trust that the universe just redirected you, that getting on the wrong train was exactly right. The choice is yours." The train was slowing down, approaching the next station. The man held out the envelope. I stared at it, my rational mind screaming that this was crazy, that strange men on trains were not to be trusted, that I should go to work and forget this ever happened. But something else, some part of me that had been dormant for years, whispered, "What if he's right? What if you're supposed to be here?" The doors opened. People got on and off. The warning chime sounded. The door started to close. In the last possible second, I grabbed the envelope and jumped off the train. I turned immediately to look back through the window, to ask the man more questions, to demand answers, but when I looked at his seat, it was empty. Completely empty. He was gone. But that was impossible. The train hadn't moved yet. He couldn't have gotten off. I would have seen him. He couldn't have moved to another car in the split second I'd turned away. Yet the seat was empty, as if he'd never been there at all. I stood on the platform, heart racing, holding the envelope. Around me, commuters hurried past, completely normal, completely unaware that something impossible had just happened. With shaking hands, I opened the envelope. Inside was a single piece of paper with an address written in careful, old-fashioned handwriting. Northwood Community Center, 847 Jefferson Street. Ask for Kendra. She's expecting you. Below the address was a single additional line. You're a teacher. Stop pretending you're not. I stared at the paper for a long time. Every rational part of my brain said this was insane. I should throw away the paper, get on the next train, go to work, forget this bizarre encounter.
But I couldn't, because everything the man had said was true. Because I was a teacher, or I was supposed to be, and I'd spent 10 years pretending I wasn't. Because something about this moment felt like the universe had just cracked open and shown me a door I didn't know existed. I pulled out my phone and typed the address into Google Maps. Northwood Community Center was in a neighborhood I'd never been to, about 30 minutes away by subway and bus. A community center I'd never heard of. I texted my manager. Family emergency. Won't be in today. It was a lie. But going to work felt like a bigger lie. I went to the address. The Northwood Community Center was a modest 2-story building in a quiet residential neighborhood. It looked like it had been there for decades, brick facade, well-maintained but clearly operating on a tight budget. A sign out front listed various programs, ESL classes, job training, youth programs, adult education. I stood outside for a full 5 minutes, second-guessing myself. This was crazy. I was crazy. I should turn around, go home, pretend this morning never happened. But I pushed open the door. Inside was a small reception area with worn but clean furniture and bulletin boards covered in community announcements. A woman in her 40s sat at the front desk, typing on a computer. "Can I help you?" she asked, looking up with a friendly smile. "I'm looking for Kendra," I said, my voice uncertain. "Kendra Franklin? She's in room 3. Just finished her morning literature class. Should be wrapping up now. Down that hall, 3rd door on the left." "Thank you." I walked down the hallway on legs that felt disconnected from my body.
This was real. The place was real. Kendra was real. What was happening? I reached room 3 and looked through the small window in the door. Inside, a woman in her 50s was talking to a small group of adults, maybe 8 people of various ages, who were seated at tables with books and papers in front of them. The class appeared to be ending. People were packing up, thanking her, heading for the door. I stepped back as the students filed out, nodding politely as they passed. Then the woman inside, Kendra presumably, looked up and saw me through the window. She smiled and waved me in. "Can I help you?" "Are you Kendra Franklin?" "I am. And you are?" "Jared Slater. Someone told me to come here, to ask for you. They said you were expecting me?" Kendra's expression shifted from friendly to curious. "Expecting you? I'm sorry, I think there might be some confusion. I wasn't expecting anyone today." I pulled out the paper, showed her the address. "Someone gave me this. On the train. He said you were expecting me." Kendra took the paper, studied it, her brow furrowed. "This is my handwriting, but I didn't write this. At least I don't remember." She paused, looked at me more carefully. "Are you a teacher?" "No. I mean, I wanted to be, but I'm in sales now. Software sales." "But you wanted to teach," Kendra said, not a question, but a statement. "Yes, I even took some classes in college, but you have that look, the look of someone who's doing the wrong work." She gestured to the now empty classroom. "This is our adult literacy and education program. We teach reading, writing, basic math, GED preparation. It's all volunteer-based. We can't pay much, just a small stipend for coordinators. But we're always desperately short on teachers, especially teachers who actually care." Something in my chest tightened. "I don't understand. Who sent me here? The man on the train. How did he know about you?"
Kendra shook her head slowly. "I have no idea. But Jared, I learned a long time ago not to question coincidences. You're here. We need help. You wanted to be a teacher. Maybe that's all that matters." "I haven't taught anything in years. I wouldn't even know where to start." "Our next session is tomorrow evening, 6 p.m. Come observe, see what we do, see if it feels right. If it doesn't, you walk away and chalk this up to a strange morning. If it does," she smiled, "well, then maybe the person on the train knew what they were talking about." I stood there, overwhelmed. "Okay, tomorrow at 6, I'll be here." "Good. I'll see you then." I left the community center in a daze and somehow made it home, though I barely remembered the journey. I spent the rest of the day sitting on my couch, staring at the address on the paper, trying to make sense of what had happened. A stranger who knew impossible things about my life, an address that led to exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been unconsciously wanting, a woman who seemed unsurprised by the bizarre circumstances. None of it made rational sense, but emotionally, spiritually, it felt like the first thing that had made sense in years. The next evening, I went back to the Northwood Community Center. Kendra introduced me to the program, adults ranging from their 20s to their 60s, all working to improve their reading and writing skills, some preparing for their GED, others just trying to gain confidence with literacy. I sat in the back of the room and watched Kendra teach. She was patient, encouraging, completely focused on her students' success, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years: envy. Not of her skills, but of her purpose. After the class, Kendra asked, "What did you think?" "I think I want to help." "Can you come back Saturday morning? We have a full day of classes. You could assist, work one-on-one with some of the students who need extra support, see if teaching feels like you remember." I went home that night and called in sick to work for the rest of the week. It was irresponsible and probably risked my job, but I didn't care. For the first time in years, I had something I actually wanted to do. I studied all week, remembering things that were left behind long ago, preparing myself to assist students in the learning journey. Saturday morning, I returned to the center. Kendra paired me with 3 students who needed help with reading comprehension. For 4 hours, I sat with them, working through passages, helping them decode difficult words, watching their faces light up when something clicked. And I remembered. I remembered why I'd wanted to be a teacher in the first place. Not for summers off or job security, but for this. These moments of connection, of helping someone understand something they'd struggled with, of being part of someone's growth. When the session ended, one of my students, a man in his 50s named Marcus, who was trying to get his GED after dropping out of high school decades ago, shook my hand. "Thank you, Mr. Slater. You explained that better than anyone's ever explained it to me. You're a natural teacher." I felt tears building in my eyes. "Thank you, Marcus. I'll see you next week." "I'll be here." Over the next 2 weeks, I maintained the bizarre double life. I went to my sales job during the day, barely functioning, hitting minimum quotas, not caring about the consequences, and I spent every evening and weekend at the Northwood Community Center, teaching adults who genuinely wanted to learn, adults who didn't take education for granted because they'd been denied it or had lost it, adults who showed up tired from their jobs, from their lives, but still made time to improve themselves. It was the most meaningful work I had ever done.
3 weeks after the morning on the train, I walked into my manager's office and quit. "I'm sorry to hear that, Jared," my manager said, though he didn't look particularly surprised or concerned. "Can I ask what you're moving on to?" "Teaching. Adult education." "That's quite a change." "Does it pay well?" "No, but it pays enough." It did pay enough. Barely. Kendra offered me a part-time paid position as an education coordinator, which meant I'd be teaching, developing curriculum, and recruiting other volunteer instructors. The salary was less than half what I'd been making in sales. I'd use my savings until I figured something out. But I didn't hesitate, because for the first time in 10 years, I was choosing the right thing instead of the practical thing. On my first official day as education coordinator, I arrived early and found Kendra setting up for a Saturday session. "Nervous?" she asked. "Terrified," I admitted. "I keep wondering if I'm making a huge mistake." "You're not. I've watched you with the students these past few weeks. This is what you're meant to do." "How did that man on the train know to send me here? How did he know about you?" Kendra paused in her setup, considering. "I've been wondering that too. The only thing I can think of is that about a month ago, I posted on a local educators forum that we were looking for volunteer teachers. Maybe someone who saw that post. I don't know. It doesn't quite make sense." It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. But I'd stopped trying to make it make sense. 2 months into my new position, I met Julia. She was a public school teacher who volunteered at the center on Saturday mornings, teaching a literacy class for non-native English speakers. She was 27, with an infectious enthusiasm for education and a laugh that made everyone around her smile. We started talking during breaks between classes. Then we started getting coffee after Saturday sessions. Then we started seeing each other outside the center. "I love that you made this change," she told me one evening over dinner. "You said you were unhappy, but you could have stayed comfortable where you were." Except I realized it wasn't comfortable at all. "And besides, I got lucky," I said. "Someone pointed me in the right direction." "That's not luck," Julia said firmly. "That's courage. Luck got you information. Courage made you act on it." Maybe she was right. Maybe the man on the train had just provided information I could have found myself if I'd been looking. Maybe I'd given him too much credit for what was ultimately my own decision. But I didn't really believe that. Because the things he'd known about Phoebe, about my dreams of teaching, about the specific nature of my unhappiness, weren't things you could guess from observation. They were things you could only know if you'd lived them yourself. 6 months after the morning I got on the wrong train, I was sitting in a coffee shop near the Northwood Community Center, reviewing lesson plans for the following week. I was genuinely happy. Not perfect. I struggled with money, worried about my students, questioned my decisions sometimes, but I was alive in a way I hadn't been in years. I looked up from my laptop and saw him, the man from the train, standing in line to order coffee, looking exactly as he had that morning. Same coat, same calm demeanor, as if no time had passed at all. I shot out of my seat and crossed the coffee shop in 4 long strides. "You! I've been hoping I'd see you again." He turned, smiled, as if he'd been expecting me. "Hello, Jared. You look well." "How did you know? How did you know about the Northwood Community Center? About Kendra? How did you know that that was where I needed to be?" He collected his coffee from the barista, gestured to an empty table. We sat.
"Because 30 years ago," he began, "I was exactly where you were. Lost. Miserable. On the wrong train, literally. And a stranger sat next to me and told me things about my life I'd never told anyone. And he gave me an address that changed everything." "So you're passing it forward," I said. "Paying it forward, or whatever." "Something like it. When I see someone at the right moment of change, at the intersection of wrong train and right timing, I help redirect them. Not everyone, mind you, only the ones who are ready to see, the ones who've reached the point where they'll actually get off the train instead of dismissing me as crazy." "But how did you know those things about me? About Phoebe? About wanting to be a teacher?" He smiled. "I pay very close attention. Your face that morning showed everything. The misery, the sense of being trapped in the wrong life. People who were that unhappy in their careers usually wanted to do something else. People who were lost tend to lose their relationships too." "And the Northwood Community Center? How did you know about Kendra?" "I've known Kendra for 25 years. She was one of my students when I taught adult education in another city. She started her own program years ago. I know she's always looking for teachers who actually care. And I know she has a gift for seeing potential in people. So when I saw you that morning, I knew exactly where to send you." It was a rational explanation, but there was still something unexplainable about it. The way he knew so many details, the way he'd vanished from the train, the way he'd known exactly the right words to say. The timing had been so perfectly, impossibly precise. "The address?" I said. "The note was in Kendra's handwriting. How did you get that?" He smiled mysteriously. "Some things are better left as mysteries, don't you think?" "Are you going to tell me your name?" "Does it matter? You don't need me anymore, Jared. You found your way." "But I want to thank you. You changed my life." "You changed your life. I just pointed you toward a door. You're the one who had the courage to walk through it." He stood up, preparing to leave. "One day, you'll do the same for someone else. You'll see someone at the right moment on the wrong train, and you'll know exactly what to say. And you'll pass it forward." "How will I know? How will I know who needs help?" "You'll know," he said simply. "Trust me, you'll know." He walked out of the coffee shop, and I didn't follow. The magic was in the moment, in the life arranging circumstances so perfectly that change became possible for someone who was ready. I went back to my laptop, back to my lesson plans, back to the life I'd built from the ruins of the life I'd been living. 2 years later, I was on the train. The same line where this had all started, though now I rode it by choice rather than obligation, heading to the community center for an evening class. A young woman got on at one of the stops, looking frustrated and defeated. She checked her phone, cursed quietly under her breath, and I heard her mutter, "Wrong train, perfect, just perfect." She sat down across from me, slumped in her seat with the particular posture of someone who's given up. And I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something familiar. The misery, the sense of being trapped in the wrong life, the quiet desperation of someone living a life that didn't fit. Before I could second-guess myself, before I could talk myself out of it, I moved to sit next to her. She looked up, startled and slightly defensive. I smiled gently and said the words that had been said to me 2 years ago. "You're exactly on time." She blinked. "What?" "You think you got on the wrong train, but you didn't."
And I saw it in her face, the same confusion and curiosity I'd felt, the same flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, something was about to change. I reached into my bag and pulled out a piece of paper I'd been carrying for weeks without knowing why. On it, I wrote an address, not the Northwood Community Center, but somewhere else, somewhere I knew she needed to be based on what I saw in her face, in her posture, in the specific quality of her unhappiness. "When we get to the next station," I said, handing her the paper, "you're going to get off this train and go here. It's going to seem random. You're going to have doubts. But trust me, it's exactly where you need to be." The train was slowing down. The woman stared at the paper, at me, clearly torn between thinking I was insane and desperately wanting to believe I was right. The doors opened. She hesitated. Then, in the last possible second, she stood and walked off the train. I watched through the window as she stood on the platform, looking at the paper, looking back at the train with questions in her eyes. But when she looked for me in my seat, I'd already moved. I was at the other end of the car, disappearing into the crowd of passengers, becoming invisible. Let her wonder, let her question, let her stand at that crossroads between the life she's living and the life she could live. Because that's how it works, that's how change happens. Not through answers, but through perfectly timed questions, through wrong trains that are actually right, through strangers who appear exactly when needed and disappear before they can be explained. The universe doesn't give us what we want. It gives us what we need, disguised as mistakes, as accidents, as wrong turns that lead us exactly where we're supposed to be. I got on the wrong train that morning 2 years ago, and it was the best mistake I ever made. Because it taught me that sometimes the wrong direction is exactly right. Sometimes getting lost is how we find ourselves. And sometimes a stranger who knows impossible things is just the universe wearing a familiar face, reminding us that we're never as lost as we think we are. We're always exactly on time. We just have to be brave enough to believe it. Have you ever had a moment where something that seemed like a mistake turned out to be exactly what you needed? Share your story in the comments below. If this story about synchronicity, finding purpose, and trusting the universe's timing touched your heart, please hit that like button and subscribe for more meaningful stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss our next inspiring tale. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.